I think that no code enables more people to build more products that serve like smaller individual customer bases. So rather than having Facebook and Google that each have billions of users, I think you're going to see a lot more companies that have a few thousand users and are a two-person team that built that product. And I think that does really help the economic disparity part of it. And it also just helps a lot more people actually take themselves out of poverty or kind of provide a career for themselves and generate new ways of working. I think that this coronavirus thing has really shown us that we need a different model for, security and job security. And I think that this is a great example of something that can provide a way for smart, creative people to work that they didn't previously have a way to actually make a reasonable income.
Welcome to The Future is No Code. My name is David Atkin. I'm joined by one of my co-founders and CEO of Adalo, Jeremy Blalock. Welcome.
Hey, David.
So if you don't know what Adalo does, we make mobile and web apps as easy as possible with drag and drop. It's much like Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD, but instead of making mockups, you actually make mobile apps that can get pushed to the Apple App Store, Google Play Store, as well as to custom domains on the web. So I'm excited to get your perspective. We actually have not talked about any of his answers or any of the questions from any of the other interviews. So I'm very curious to to get your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I just got these for the first time yesterday, so I haven't seen anybody else's.
All right, let's get started with this. Okay, so when did you get into NoCode, and what made you want to start Adalo?
Yeah, so I got into NoCode, I guess, before NoCode was really nearly as popular as it is today, but that was back in 2017. And I really saw the rise of design tools with Figma, Sketch, and Vision, all those tools becoming really popular. But there wasn't really anything that took what you built and translated it into a real product. So what I wanted to do is basically take that and build something that lets you build a fully functional mobile app, but not having to know how to code.
Yeah, awesome. And then, so just so everyone's aware, so then, Jeremy was actually working on that out in California, and I and another co-founder, Ben, were actually here in St. Louis, and then we randomly got connected and met up, and that's kind of how Adalo all started. All right, awesome. So what is your definition of no code?
I mean, I think that now these days, a lot of people are clumping together a lot of things that wouldn't traditionally have been called no code and putting it in that mix. But I think really what no code is technology that enables people to build technology. So it enables people to build things that they would not have been able to build without code before. And those things generally are in themselves technology that can be used to do something else. So rather than just building, an email template, which I wouldn't necessarily consider as no code as what we're doing or as what other companies are doing, what you're really building is something that's a product in itself.
Awesome. And then, so would you include like automation then as part of that, or is that like a component to like a larger product, like offering or solution?
I mean, I think that automation fits the bill for what is no code. I think that often in the traditional code world, there were plenty of programmers building automation for various processes and workflows that totally encased what was code before. So
yeah. Awesome. And then let's see. So obviously the space, as you alluded to before, like hasn't actually always been called no code. So when do you think that this started, and do you actually have somebody or a group of people that you like kind of credit with starting the no code movement?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. So when I first joined an incubator back in 2018, I was in there for one day just visiting, and somebody asked me, so what are you doing? Is it kind of like a low code solution? I was like, well, it's really more like no code. It's not really low code, but at the time it sounded weird and nobody was saying that. So I think it's a bit later that it actually really started, probably in early 2019. The whole Product Hunt team really, in my opinion, coined the phrase, because Ryan Hoover, the CEO of Product Hunt, posted a big blog post about NoCode in early 2019. And then shortly afterward, Ben Tossell launched MakerPad, and Ben Tossell had previously worked at Product Hunt. So somehow there was magic within the Product Hunt organization that just came up with this thing, but I don't know exactly how else it came to fruition.
Awesome. Yeah. And then obviously like was clearly made even more prevalent, with the NoCode conference and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely the kind of jump from Product Hunt to Webflow in that sense. All right, let's see. Now, the last one in this kind of final intro section, there's a little bit of, and I'm actually super curious to get your perspective if I've been typing it wrong on our team this whole time, but do you go with no space code or no dash code?
I think it's just the hashtag NoCode, all one word. I think that's
all right. You're going hashtag NoCode. All right. I love it. Okay. So now getting to like kind of the main, part of the interview where, we're all really excited about, what this is going to mean for everybody, but there's lots of different types of roles and different types of businesses that will be affected by this. So the first group really of this kind of how it's all going to affect us is businesses, right? So what is this going to mean for startups? What is this going to mean for your small businesses? And then what is this going to mean for the larger enterprises?
Yeah, I mean, I think for startups, it really just lets you get your first product built much quicker than you would have been able to do before. And, when I started Adalo, it took me about 7 months before I actually had a product shipped that had real users on it. And I think that obviously was a little longer because we were building a no-code tool, but I think that will go down so much. I know that there's companies already that have built tools with Adalo that have shipped their product weeks after getting started. It's crazy. They had one day I had a paying customer 2 weeks after he started the project, and that's just unheard of, in the traditional startup world, the traditional code world, and it's just crazy to see. I think that for small businesses, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I think on one side, they will be able to build apps themselves that can be useful for various things, like restaurants can build ordering apps and, stores can build curbside pickup and things like that. But I think there's also going to be a whole segment of startups that serve their needs a lot more specifically because it's cheaper for those startups to build products, because it doesn't have to be that the actual end customers are building with no code, but it's also all the people that are touched by those products that are built with no code.
And then what about the larger enterprises? Yeah,
and I think that one obviously is one that we haven't been as focusing on as much yet at Adalo, but we've seen some early indication that's really interesting as well. I think that within larger enterprises, there's a lot of things that people want to do, and there's a lot of initiatives that various teams want to build, but they just have never gotten the development resources to really do those fully. One example was one of our customers they have a lot of vendors who are contractors, and they wanted to build a community app that would let them connect all those vendors together so they could have communication with each other and chat and solve each other's problems. And that really enabled them to build an app with Adalo that never could have been built before, because nobody would budget that. No engineering team would have spent time on that. They don't have a lot of engineers at that company. So as a result, I think it enables them to do interesting things that they wanted to do for a long time, and kind of that what you would call a digital transformation, but just things that aren't the top of the spear.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's kind of that, I guess it's like tech enabling other parts of the business, not necessarily maybe the traditional like product enterprises in that sense, at least what you're referring to there.
I think it'll take a while till an enterprise is using a no-code tool to build their primary product if they're a technology company, just because they are the slowest in terms of adopting new things for things that really are core to their business. But for all these tangential things, I think it can provide value today. And I think that it's just a matter of education and people knowing that that's possible.
Yeah, that also is a nice little transition into our kind of like next set of questions. So this is more of like your traditional tech roles, right? So what is this going to mean for developers? What is this going to mean for designers, UX designers, and what is it going to mean for PMs? And I guess there's a little bit of like two-part question there. One, like, what is it going to mean for each one of those individuals? But then like, what is it going to mean for at those more traditional tech companies in terms of like the handoffs and how that works, in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the thing that I've always talked about with developers is developers really like building functionality that's reusable and general purpose and can be used for a lot of different things. So most developers that I know who are really skilled, they would prefer to write a general purpose component that can be reused somewhere, or an open source library, something like that, as opposed to writing this one-off thing that will only ever be used here once. And I think that one thing that we're really excited about with Adalo is that developers will, for the first time, be able to actually build components that will plug back in and provide new functionalities to the platform. And so they won't have to spend time building all the boilerplate and all the boring stuff, but they can just build that one component that's really needed. And I think that in the broader world, there's a huge shortage of developers today. And so the only way to solve that is to have developers build things that get used more times, because the number of apps being built is not going down. The number of software applications that are needed are just exploding. And so as a result, I think really leveraging developer skill sets to build reusable functionality that can then plug in and be applied on top of something like Adalo that provides the baseline standard functionality is really the best of both worlds. I think for designers, there's going to be somewhat of a shift where the lines are blurring between what the initial design phase is and what the publishing, or like the design phase all the way through the prototype, all the way through the development with developers to production. If what I was describing with the components really becomes a reality, then design systems combined with no-code tools will mean that designers can actually build the product to a basic extent and then plug in the things developers are building. And this is something that, again, I was seeing really early on building Adalo, but it's taken a while to actually get to a point where that's a reality. But I think it's still super promising and exciting to me that that's going to happen at some point. For PMs, that's one where PMs no longer have to ask permission. They can just go build something themselves and then say, hey, designer, help me fix this thing, rather than having to go through the traditional channel of like, I want to build a product. I need to get a designer on board, get a developer on board, get my boss to authorize this project. They can just go build it themselves in a weekend and then show it and say, hey, it's ready to publish. And that's going to totally transform how fast organizations can move, because often one of the things that slows people down most is just dependencies within an organization and resource availability. And if you only need one person to build a product, then there's a lot less of that involved.
And then what do you think, like, in terms of, like at companies right now that like already have existing platform, like, whether that's a web app, and, there's varying degrees of like complexity, right? Like obviously Facebook will not like tomorrow jump on a no-code platform and get on that, right? But there are other ones that, are very simple right now. So when no-code, as no-code starts to get more powerful, like how do you imagine that like infiltrating into like maybe more of the, obviously for like tangential products, right? Like the PM, like you're saying, can build it. The designer can build it if it's something new. But what about, how is it going to shift from, this platform that's been built on traditional code with the different handoff process to, how is that code base going to shift to a no-code platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things to think about there. One is, I think when Facebook launched React Native, they did not immediately shift all their mobile apps over to React Native because it just wasn't a very mature platform, right? And what they did instead was they built the ads manager within Instagram on React Native. And then a couple of years later, they built the ad manager somewhere else on React Native. And so it's like a very slow adoption for the things that are, there's certain parts of the product that are not used as frequently. And those are the areas where you don't want to invest as many engineering hours in it. And so you want to use a different technology. And I think that no-code is a great example of that. I think that already companies are starting to adopt things like MuleSoft and Zapier and other tools for like workflow automation, generating finance reports and that kind of stuff. But there's also going to be product no-code stuff with, Webflow and Adalo and other tools that creeps in those subtle ways where it's like, this page, we didn't want to spend a month building this page, so we just built it in no-code and it's out there now. And then maybe that'll proliferate to other parts of the product over time, but I think it's going to be sort of a gradual transition. I think one of the nice things is that a lot of the no-code tools provide ways to be either embedded in iframes or embed other content or be plug and play in an interesting way. And so Adalo is 100% the same way. We've tried to build it where you can take an Adalo app and use it as a little iframe app within something, or you can put your other content from your site inside of Adalo and use it kind of in either way that way. So I think that's the way to make it work, is make it as kind of as reusable and flexible as possible so that you can integrate no code into your existing tools without totally ripping them and starting fresh.
Yeah. I think that's like, a really interesting way of looking at it, and definitely like a more realistic way, just in terms of like, well, we only have so many hours. So like, well, of course we're going to do that. But I think that perspective was like super helpful for me, because, I think most people look at it and they're like, there's no way, like, how is this like possibly going, like, how are we possibly going to shift? And you're like, no, like, it's just going to chip away a little bit at a time, just like you would like add new functionality to wherever your current existing product is a little bit at a time. You will kind of a little bit of a time, chip away at, I guess you'd say, like that traditional platform, moving to, potentially more and more of it to a no-code platform. All right. The next group is all about consulting. So what is this going to mean for your traditional dev shops? And then what is this going to mean for the freelancers and agencies? And then finally, like, what about your non-dev, or I guess I'd say non-specifically dev consultants, right? The big, like the main consulting groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've already seen a lot with like what are the new no-code agencies. So that's a new thing that's already sprouted up. And obviously, when we launched our experts program a week and a half ago, that really is a good example of people who are using no-code tools to build apps for other people. I think we've already gotten several paid customers who are coming through that channel of they had an Adalo expert build an app for them, and those guys are making money because of us, because of Adalo, and the customers are super happy as a result, right? So that's already kind of proving that new model. I think for existing dev agencies, they will often want to leverage this as much as possible, because it's a question of how can I do something as cheaply as possible and still charge the same amount, right? I think for no-code companies, it's a little bit of the opposite end, where we're trying to make something so affordable that anybody can use it. But on the agency side, they're trying to say, how can I still charge a high price, but also get it done as cheaply as possible? And so they're going to find that they can use like some of the template functionalities in Adalo. They can build out the template and reuse it for 10 different customers, or they can build a component with code and then plug it in and use it for several customers and have that be a unique value prop, right? So I think they'll probably end up on that side. I think the design guys are a little more interesting. It's TBD what will happen there, but I think there's an opportunity for them to kind of go upstream and do more of the development themselves. Like one of our agencies that's on the experts program, 24-hour design, they've already started doing more of the actual development because they now have access to these tools, whereas previously they were just doing the design and then contracting out or referring the development work to other development agencies. That's really interesting.
And then what about like maybe people that don't even think of themselves as in like tech consulting right now? I guess I'd say like the really like the more like I came from business school and now I'm like an actual consultant. Like what do you think about like that side of the equation?
I mean, I think that stuff fits in really well with actually what's happening at the kind of enterprise internal use case that's already happening, like that customer I mentioned of ours. I think that there's a lot of things where consultants are supposed to solve some specific initiative, and they have a limited amount of time to do it and a limited amount of resources. And so a no-code tool is the perfect way to prove something out and show that it's possible. And so I think those will start to be super, super popular within the Accentures and those kinds of companies.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, let's see. And then the last one, this is a little bit of a catch-all, but so, what is this going to mean for all of society, right? Like our individual personal lives that maybe are outside of work and our roles. What is this going to mean for kids today moving forward? And then, what is this going to mean for economic disparity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things there to unpack. The first one is, I think that no-code enables more people to build more products that serve like smaller individual customer bases. So rather than having Facebook and Google that each have billions of users, I think you're going to see a lot more companies that have a few thousand users and are a two-person team that built that product. And I think that does really help the economic disparity part of it. And it also just helps a lot more people actually take themselves out of poverty or kind of provide a career for themselves and generate new ways of working. I think that this coronavirus thing has really shown us that we need a different model for security and job security. And I think that this is a great example of something that can provide a way for smart, creative people to work that they didn't previously have a way to actually make a reasonable income. It was kind of like previously you could be an entrepreneur, and if you wanted to be in technology, you could either make $1 billion or you could make $0, and most people made zero. And so you kind of had to choose, where now you can make $10,000 a month and really support yourself and your family, but not have to be raising venture capital or on that kind of level of constant uncertainty around the next phase of your business.
Yeah. And then what about kids in this kind of equation?
I mean, I think that we've already definitely seen that kids are some of the people that pick up Adalo the fastest, and I'm sure it's true with the other platforms as well. I think that when you grow up around technology and Roblox and other, things that are like little builders in themselves, you just have a deeper understanding. I think that each next generation will be better at it. And so there's already there was a high school in France that had all of their students build apps on Adalo last week, and they built some incredible things that look better than some of our paying customers. Yeah. And it's just funny to see this kid who's probably in their mid-teens is able to produce a totally high quality product that could be published and probably make money. And I think that it's going to provide opportunities. I think this sort of ties into how all of education is shifting, where my thesis has kind of been that the order in which education happens might change a little bit. I don't think you have to necessarily go to grade school and then go to middle school and then go to high school and then college and then you start actually doing work. I think that now people in high school have the opportunity to make money and try things and do things of their own that are totally entrepreneurial and unique.
Yeah, more than like a lemonade stand.
More than a lemonade stand, more than even like a YouTube channel, because that's kind of the popular one now, right? But I think that just expands over time, and it might mean that as colleges are super impacted now by coronavirus and other macro factors, probably fewer people will be going to college in fall than were last fall, and probably a lot of those people will want to start businesses. And so as NoCode tools, we're providing a lot of easy ways for them to do that without having to have a college education and a CS degree.
Yeah, and a ton of money. All right, let's see. So the next section, I'm going to try my best to hold you accountable to actually give us some date ranges here. You can be approximate or have ranges for sure. Yep. All right. So when do you think it'll be as common to make an app as it is today to make a PowerPoint presentation or a Google Slide, Google Sheets, whatever?
I mean, I think that with some of the tools that are out there, you already see it happening pretty frequently. Like Adalo, probably a little less so because a lot of the apps are a little more complex, but something like Glide or some of the other tools, you're building apps for each thing you're doing in your company. But I think that really you have to think about too, I want to see the number of users be greater from no-code apps as from viewers of PowerPoints. I think that's what's more exciting to me. And I think that will probably happen in the next 3 or 4 years. I think where the audience of no-code apps will be greater than the audience of people listening to or watching PowerPoint presentations. What I mean by that is a PowerPoint probably has an average of 5 people, viewing it. An app might have an average of 100 people. And so you don't have to have as many apps, but you'd have a bigger audience is what I mean.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I like that perspective. New perspective. All right, let's see. So back to education for a little bit. When do you think most colleges will start offering no-code classes, or trade schools, or whatever, in this new education world? And then when do you think that'll start happening at a younger age?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we already saw that happen at a high school last week. We had a college hackathon that had about 30 people show up and make apps back in November, and it's definitely there's a lot of need and interest there. It's just a question of when the teachers and when everybody involved gets around to thinking that it's the right thing to do. I think that one thing we're trying to do is really push that, and we're trying to do some education of those schools and tell them hey, this is a thing. You should get involved. But I think we already see that probably 5% of our signups are with EDU email addresses. Whether those are professors or students, there's definitely interest there. And I think it'll probably happen in the next couple of years that'll be the case.
Awesome. All right. Next one. When do you think there'll be more products launched on Product Hunt that are built with no code than the traditional coding?
I mean, I feel like all of fall, it seemed like that was already the case, but it probably wasn't actually by the numbers. I mean, I think that'll ebb and flow, but I think we've already gotten to the point where at least a third of the things that launch on Product Hunt are no code related in some way or another, or built with no code, one of the two. And I think we're basically already there.
Okay. All right. And then let's see, next one. When do you think no code will meet up with low code in terms of functionality?
I mean, I think really the big kind of difference between the two has been, one is a top-down sale to an enterprise, and the other is a bottom-up sale to somebody who works at a company or is an individual or owns a startup, right? And once the once the bottom up sale is a good enough product that somebody in an enterprise or large company wants to use it over the thing that they're being sold, and they really fight for that, then it will eclipse the low code market, and those things will go away, or they'll have to adapt dramatically to be more like the no code tools. And so I think that that's probably going to happen in the next, I think I've said super short time horizons for a lot of this stuff, but I think the adoption is going to start for enterprises really in full force sometime in, 2021, 2022. I think 2020 will be really kind of people being conservative because of coronavirus. But I think as that starts to go away and people are trying to get back to work and really do important things, they'll be looking at no-code tools to do that. And the low-code tools just won't be able to keep up. And so they'll have to either modernize or adapt or just go away.
All right, awesome. Next one. When do you think we will see a product? And I guess I'll specify by saying like more of like actual like a traditional software product, not necessarily like an e-commerce no-code site, because there probably already is e-commerce sites that are built with no-code that have that much popularity. But an actual let's say technology software that has a popularity in users of like a Trello or TurboTax built on a no-code platform. So not a no-code platform, but built on a no-code platform.
I mean, I think that'll probably take a little longer, probably more on the 5 to 7 year time horizon. The reason being, it takes 3 to 5 years to build that tool just from a growth perspective. And so even if you got started next year, it's still going to take you a while to get to the point where you are a fully competitive, massive market player. But I think that companies will probably be started this year that'll go on to become that big. I just don't know that the no-code tools are really there yet to support them in that full journey. But I'm very optimistic that some of them will. And I think that we can grow with a company if they start with us today. We can grow with them to be as big as they want us to be by the time that they're there. So I think it's really having some of those companies do that is going to be critical to getting the no-code tools up to speed and up to quality as well. Because we need to grow with those companies as they have 1 million users. We don't have any apps with 1 million users yet. We don't know what new challenges that'll bring. And so I think that it'll really be like sort of a tag team with the platforms and the actual companies back and forth.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a race, but it's good. It's good. Yeah. It's good to push. I feel like each one of them pushes, what's needed in terms of, functionality and performance and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. When do you think one of those will actually IPO?
Well, I mean, I think that my personal view on it is that IPO timeframe is going to come down. So probably not in the timeframe that they've been doing so far. Just looking at all the failed IPOs of Uber and WeWork and so many over this past year, and I think that's really, there are multiple factors that are affecting that. But I think that the time to IPO is going to go from 10 to 12 years probably back down to 3 to 5 years. And so as a result, I think that those companies that I said about being like a major player, they would be IPO'd by that point. I think that's probably awesome. The same time frame. It's 5 to 7.
All right, let's see. Next one. When do you think there will be more freelancers and agencies and dev shops that use no-code tools than ones that don't?
I mean, I think that every freelancer and agency needs to use no-code tools to stay competitive, just starting in 2020. People are going to be wanting that. I mean, I think most major website development agencies are already looking at tools like Webflow because they know that it just makes it cheaper for them, and it also makes it better for their clients to manage the data once they build the app. Or once they build the site, I think that that's going to continue into apps, and so probably this year already, we're kind of already there where it really matters, and people are asking for it.
Awesome. And then the last one, the one that I'm most excited about, is when do you think that global leaders, and this would be any president or any or I guess I'd say any major politician, right? I'm sure there's, really small politicians that know, but let's say major global leaders start talking about no code.
I mean, so I do know that a app that was built with our platform with Adalo is already in procurement talks with one of the government agencies in Europe. I know that there have been a couple others that have been in final stages of our RFP processes in those kind of things. I don't know that they necessarily knew that they were no code, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think no code will be very important in terms of just job growth, like I mentioned before. And I think that will be kind of what gets talked about most relating to it is how do we fuel more entrepreneurs? Because as starting restaurants and starting physical businesses has been the most risky thing you could possibly do in 2020. And so I think a lot of those small-time entrepreneurs will look for other ways to build businesses, and no-code tools are a great way to do that. So I think that that'll get mentioned a lot in terms of economic impact and growing, small businesses, et cetera.
Awesome. All right. And then the final one, what is maybe the most interesting thing you've seen built with no code, or maybe just like what's like the best story that gets you excited about this whole thing?
I mean, I think what never fails to surprise me is just the amount of different types of things that people build with no code. And it could be on Adalo. I've seen some crazy things. Like I've seen an app that helped people schedule or help people figure out Ramadan. So if you're a Muslim and you don't know what things you're supposed to be able to do and not do, and you want to have other Muslims to talk to about Ramadan, there's now an app for that built with Adalo that has a ton of users. So things like that like I would never have thought of this. I think one of the benefits of no code is that it lets people who actually have the problems solve the problems. And so I, as the engineer, am not the one gating this and saying like, that's a bad idea, I don't think you should do that. You get to make your own decision and build whatever you want. And so I think that the number of different things is really the most exciting, but like that app was crazy. I think that we've seen some really amazing designs produced by people who didn't have design backgrounds or development backgrounds. And just because they've had such a different take on it. Like that community app I mentioned earlier, there's one that's doing pretty well right now that's built in Adalo called Moonifest, which is it helps you basically based on the moon cycles and the moon phases, determine how your moods and how that's going to affect you. And I think that's a big one that's super interesting. But really just the creativity and the whole vast array of things that people are making is the most exciting thing to me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining me and chatting everything no code. Awesome. All right. See you, man.
All right. Thanks, David.